It's 7:07. I'm Daedalus Howell, and I'm talking with Dr. Mariana Martinez.
Hello.
Hello. Before we started the segment, we're talking about titles and things like that. You have a PhD, which is awesome. Is it in education?
It is education policy, organization and leadership, but it's really education policy that I look at.
You're the only person I've actually met with a PhD after all these years, besides
Really?
professors.
Oh, well.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends who are all BD, all but dissertation.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That is the long process, and I was in that process for a while. I had my 2-year-old son before I finished my PhD.
Oh, wow.
And it came to a point where I told my advisor, I was like, I need to finish. I don't know what it's going to take. And it took a few weeks of 12-hour days without seeing my son, but we got it done, and now we enjoyed a really great summer together. No work, no dissertation, just us. So it worked out in my favor to finish.
And this is really illustrative when it comes to your commitment, right, to education and
Yes.
these kind of things, and in part, why you're running for to be one of the trustees of Santa Rosa Junior College, right? You
Yes.
can do it.
Yes. Oh, yes, I can do it.
But I mean, you just got your PhD, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a child, you work full time, and now you want to be a trustee.
Yes.
Where does that drive come from to want to give back like that?
Well, now that you're done with a PhD, you do have a great deal of time that you can spend, but it's also because it's a commitment, right? I was at an event where we were fundraising for scholarship money, and one of the keynote speakers was, now that you have this degree, you do have a commitment. And I do have a commitment. I have a commitment to a community that basically helped me get to the point where I am, getting a PhD, being one of the very few to earn a PhD. And it wasn't by myself. It was for them. It was because of them. And so for me, it's just, you just got to keep going. You can't just stop, especially when you do have that degree. You have those 3 letters after your name.
Yeah.
And especially for women of color, Latina women, that just, means that you have the potential, what it takes to do what you need to do. And yeah, time, we're already spread thin regardless whether I was doing this or not. But, one of the things that I've learned is I work with students one-on-one, the progress is slow. So within this position, I would have the opportunity to at least have more impact, larger students, and also for more generations to come, not just one.
Yeah, well, congratulations, first off. I didn't realize it was that recently. That's awesome. So let's back up. Let's talk about your personal academic odyssey, because it sounds like it really was a community event in some ways,
Oh, yes. Well, I came to the United States when I was about 7 or 8 years old. But prior to that, I came here.
Where were you from?
I am originally from, I was born in Tijuana, Mexico, but my mom's from Guadalajara, Jalisco, so I was raised there. Unfortunately, because of economics and so on, I lived with my grandmother and one of my youngest aunts. But my youngest aunt was the one who taught me how to read and write. Wow. And it was not an easy task because I was very reluctant to say the nicest word. But after learning how to read and write, then it was a beginning of just wanting more knowledge and understanding what that meant. And so when my mom and I migrated to the U.S., I was about 7 or 8 years old. I skipped class, I came in 3rd grade. I knew how to read and write, but not in English. I learned quickly because I had that foundation. And I think as I've studied, I realized that that's critical for second language learners. If you have that foundation in your primary language, you're more likely to learn a secondary language quicker and so on. But I was a good kid, or I consider myself a good kid, because I saw my mom sacrifice. And I couldn't add more challenges to her life and my life, technically, because it was her and I who migrated to the U.S.
Yeah.
She was a single parent. And so from there, I academically excelled. I did well, but because I wanted that type of attention from her. I wanted, if she took time off from work, that it was worthwhile. It wasn't because I was doing something bad or so on. And it just started there. She remarried in 1990s. We moved to Northern California in 93. I ended up going to Cook Middle School, really good in math. And I think that's what caught my counselor's attention. And he recommended me to Upper Bound. And Upper Bound is a federally funded program, works with first-generation low-income students. Clearly, I didn't know about the low income. I didn't know I was poor. When you have everything, quote unquote, you don't think, oh, I'm poor or whatever. Yeah. And so, from there, they had such a commitment in my educational success. I graduated Cook, went to Alsea. I was in the right classes, which I didn't know at that time what that meant. You know, the A through Gs, all college bound.
Okay, right.
All college bound classes.
And do you think if you were not part of this program that you would not have been made aware of this?
Because out of my group of friends, out of the 5 of us, I was the only one in upper bound, and the other ones weren't. And I could see some of the classes were different. I was in predominantly classes with predominantly white students. I was technically usually the 1 or 2 Latina student in my classes, right? So there was a clear like discrepancy in like what kind of classes who was taking. I would see my friends mostly at lunch and breaks, and then but I would also feel like what's happening? Why can't I hang out with my friends in classes? I rarely had my friends in my classes. Those that I would walk to and from school, they weren't the ones in my classes.
Was it difficult to be isolated from your friends in that case? Like,
yes and no.
Because your lives are moving apart really at that point.
Yes and no, because I would share all my information with them, so at least my close, my girlfriends and I, at least we would have that information and be like, apply, like
this is what you do.
This is what you're supposed to do, right? In my head.
But that's, I mean, counselors should be doing that.
Yeah, but LC starting, it was very difficult. We did have a lot of students per counselor, a lot of movement. Unfortunately, like by the time I graduated, I think we had gone through all 4 different counselors because there was change and it was settling, right? Like, how do we make this new school work? Because I'm class of 98, so we're the ones that did the full 4 years in constant change.
Yeah.
Because
you were the first class to go.
The real first 4 years, I tell that we are the real first 4 class. But from there, it was just upper bound, just kept me, Howard Willis, Morena Taylor, they just kept me, you have to keep on going. And I went straight to Sonoma State because of that, because they prepared me. And it wasn't, school or higher education wasn't about, oh, you're going to make this money. It was, for them, it was always to give back. And that's how they always kind of taught me. My mom did the same, she was like, you're going to do this, just remember why you're doing it, and so on. And it's always stuck at Sonoma, involved in everything that you can think of.
I mean, do you feel, obviously you have great passion. This is a responsibility you've taken on. But do you feel like in some ways you've been encumbered by this responsibility, that you have to give back?
I think at times when I was in college, I felt
Who
drained.
are you doing this for? You or them? Yeah.
Like I felt drained, and I think it was because you do a lot more work than others think you're doing, right? Like you're taking your 12, 15 units, you're working, because I had to work. That was not an option, 20 hours. Being in clubs and organization, that could be between 20 to 25 hours of your life. Right. And so you're constantly giving and giving. But you know what? When I finished, I did ask one friend, I was like, what is the price that you pay, right, for this price, like for the degree? And is it worth it? And at the end, I was like, yeah, it's worth it, because I get to have students or people in my community who I see now them going into higher education, right? Going, and like even now I have students who are going to graduate school. I have students at Davis in PhD programs, at Columbia and masters, and I'm like, yeah, it's definitely worth it. But at that time when you're just so tired, and you do have to take breaks. I can honestly tell you that having my son helped me take a step back and just really enjoy motherhood, enjoy relearning again, but enjoy coming back to the community, because when you do a PhD, you leave. I left the University of Illinois, and I needed to take that step back. Yeah. I'm like, I need to regroup myself. I need to think about what am I going to teach this human, right? What am I going to, how am I going to enjoy him and this beautiful thing that I do, which is teaching others. How do I do that? And it really did help. But yeah, you do need to take a break. Like you literally need to be like, you need your 5 months or a year and just tune out, because otherwise you get burned out.
We're going to take a few seconds here on 707. We're talking with Dr. Mariana Martinez. We'll be right back. And we're back on 707. I'm Daedalus Howell. We're talking with Dr. Mariana Martinez. She is running for the Board of Trustees with Santa Rosa Junior College. But before that, you grew up in Roseland for a bit.
Yes, well, I've been in the Southwest side since I moved to California, to Northern California.
When did you move to? I know you came to the States.
We moved in the mid-1990s. Okay. So right before LC Allen was finished, and we moved over there.
That's a pretty big move at that age, like 12, 13?
Yeah. From Southern California to over here, and it's a very different world. And actually, it's very different now. Even Santa Rosa is very different from when we moved in.
Yeah.
But
That's a tough age to move anywhere. You know, you get friends and stuff. Yeah.
I left a lot of friends. I was like, oh, what did I do?
Yeah.
No, but I think it worked out for our benefit, like I said. But also, so I've been in Southwest. We've been in the Roseland kind of, you know, the unincorporated area.
Yeah.
I think maybe for the last 5-6 years. But for me, there's been no difference between Roseland and living in the Southwest side. Just, I went to Elsie.
But you said it changed, though. It's changed a lot. I mean.
Oh yeah, I mean it changed in terms like Santa Rosa has changed. Our community is currently changing a lot in terms of who's living there, who's moving in, the cost of housing. All of that has definitely had a huge impact. There's good things, right? Like the Bear Community Farm. I love it. I live down the street from there. I see more involvement in, or events for community, specifically there at Rams, at Shepherd, and now with the library and the community center. I love that place. My son loves that place. So, you know, there's that kind of change, but at the same time, there's also a change in terms of not always necessarily getting what the community needs, right? So it's not necessarily a good thing, or slow progress. Right, it's taking a long time for attention to be paid into the issues of that specific community because it's very different.
Who gets left behind when these changes occur? I mean, it sounds like some of it gets embraced and it's great for everyone, but it seems also like some people get left behind. And
are the poorer community. They're the ones that are getting, and they tend to be, for our, you know, in this area, tend to be our Latino community, recent immigrants, undocumented community who have been there for a long time, but now they, you know, it's a push out with the high cost of living, and then with, well, now we have some rent control, but that has definitely, it's beginning to change what the community is looking like. Who has access to what is definitely huge. You know, like I said, we have good things happening, but at the same time, bad things happening. While Rams and Shepherd are highly regarded in the portrait of Sonoma County, they're ranked pretty low in educational outcome, right?
Really?
And that's scary. That's not because most of students of color or poor students, first generation, go there, and then they transfer to RUP or LC and so on. And that was for me very heartbreaking because we do invest, but do we invest enough? And I know other communities would be like, oh, well, how much more do you want or what do you need? But you need quality teachers. You need to support and believe in the students. And so there's something happening because we do have a lower educational attainment than other groups in the same city. You know, the portrait of Sonoma County was kind of scary to say, you know, one looks like Mississippi, the poorest part of Mississippi, but then you also have Fountain Grove, which is the richest part, you know, in the country in some cases. And I'm like, how do you have those two disparities within one freeway?
Within, 2 miles.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes, and then with higher education, most of these students or young adults, including their parents, will go to the community college, right? But that voice is not necessarily heard. I would be the second person from the Roseland area to run for the Board of Trustees.
Only the second person?
Only the second person. The first person was Carol Ellis, and Carol Ellis was my principal at Cook Middle School. So do I know who she is? Yes. Do I know where her heart was? Yes, because she was a very strong black woman. And her and Mr. Edwards from Elsie Allen, you know, they set the standard high, at least in my opinion. So to know that I'm the second one, that I would be the first Latina to sit on the board. Jordan Burns is Latino too, but to be the first Latina woman to sit on that board, to be the first to have a PhD on that board, right?
Ever?
Currently, okay. I don't know if ever, but it's also in education policy, right? So that says a lot about the importance even of coming from that community, because those voices are not necessarily always included.
Right.
Because we can think of students who are first generation, but I'm like, if you don't think about the fact that they are coming from very working class, or right now with the passing of the UFW overtime or the $15 an hour, that's huge for this particular community because we're not at that stage. It's huge because even a certificate, not even to get your AA or to transfer, certificate will change the lives of the students and their families in terms of being able to get paid more, move up in the jobs that they currently have. So you have to think about those needs. I also grew up in a community with English language, language learning. It's huge. We have to think about what does that look like. And in a time where also, personally, like women, are beginning to be the largest head of households Latinas are.
Right.
So to be able to do all these things and think about not just a specific community, but think about those intersections when you're thinking about policy and the board, that, you know, the community college is where the access should be granted, should be there for all, but sometimes they're not, because we have to think about costs, we have to think about transportation, we have to think about housing, and all of those things matter.
How do you think the JC does right now?
We're doing, I want to say, we're doing good.
Yeah.
But
we're still one of the top.
Oh yeah, we are a jewel. I mean, we are in the top, 10 of the community colleges in the system. We are great.
In the nation, yeah.
In the nation. We get our students to, the top tier institutions, but it's not all of the students.
Right.
It's only a few students. And not in a good timing, right? Like they're taking 3, 4, up to 5 years just to transfer.
Right.
When students could have already finished a degree, they had gone straight to a 4-year.
I heard a statistic the other day that the average time is 7 years at the JC, because you have people who come in and out of the system, but
So,
7 years.
Yeah. And that impacts students too, right? I understand community college, and not everybody's going to transfer, and that's great, but I think we need to gear our students, if that's their goal, that we have to have our support services geared, specifically to what it is that they need, and be collectively in possibly even one place, so information is there. It could be information overload, I'm not going to deny that, but some students are just not getting the information. But the other thing that I was just discussing with somebody was that high school students are told, oh, well, you can go to the community college, so you don't have to take this class. But if we don't prepare them, even in high school, they will be at the JC for a longer time, right? Because there was an article about the remedial classes and what does that do? It delays students. Some have to take almost 2 years before they can get into an academic course.
And they should have gotten that in high school.
Yeah, and they should have done that. And I'm like, and again, that's where you see that there's a connection between the Santa Rosa School Board and the junior college. We're not two separate entities. Technically, we are part of the same district, right? But we need to really have that communication, and it's not just about, making sure we have buildings, but it's also about what does that communication look like? How are we going to make our cradle to career a reality? Because for some careers, you need a degree. You can't just get a certificate or vocational training. You need that degree.
Let's pick up on that, and when we come back, it's 7:07. I'm Daedalus Howell. I'm talking to Dr. Mariana Martinez. Be right back. 7:07. I'm Daedalus Howell. We're back with Dr. Mariana Martinez. We're talking about, well, first off, her candidacy for Santa Rosa Junior College's Board of Trustees, but also the nature of how education has changed and how to best use education to one's best advantage. Has the curriculum we've set up, not just in our secondary schools, but in our community colleges, lagged behind the reality of people's experiences and what they really need to develop upward mobility and economic viability?
I think so. I mean, when we look at what, you have, if you don't have, not fresh, but if you don't have faculty who are currently doing a lot of work and research, you kind of can fall behind, right? There are faculty who are very creative, and while we have standards and so on, in their day-to-day, in their lesson plans and all that, they can, there was a young professor who's doing work with some of the English language learner students at the JC, doing a lot of great work. They takes them to the community, so they're trying to, make sure that it's not just theory, but it's also practice, like what does it look like and so on. And I try to do that myself within my classes, because I'm like, this is great, but what does it look like today, right? Because we're still talking about 1920s, 1930s, 1940s.
Right, you've inherited a legacy of an education modality that is 100 years old.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to really expand. I'm lucky that I teach in Chicano studies, so I have the ethnic studies perspective, and some of my students who are white, they get freaked out because they're like, oh my God, I've never been taught about this, right? Like this experience, what does it look like? But there are faculty who bring in those different perspectives, and they try to help students understand what has changed, how it has changed, where we are now still, right? We still have racism, we still have discrimination, prejudice. How does it work today? How do we combat that? And also, but how do you do it in an area of fields, right? Because if you're talking about science, technology, engineering, mathematics, how do you incorporate these things, right? These needs? And I'm like, well, there's still a lack of women in science, in labs, developing all these things. If you don't try to bring even that as an issue and discuss it, and then also it creates biases, right? Or one time
that are self-perpetuating.
Yeah, so, like sometimes, so like the seatbelt, I didn't realize that they made a lot of the laws change about the little kids not being able to sit in the front and sit them in the back, because the the airbags were designed for males. And it wasn't until a woman got into that field that they're like, we're smaller, kids are smaller, we need to really, move some of these laws. And so again, it's like the introduction of women, introduction of people of color, introduction of all these other, not alternative, but different perspectives, will we be able to actually have curriculum and things like that that can be more about what's happening now.
Right. And so it's not just diversity for diversity's sake.
Oh, no, it's really thinking about, like I said before, what I bring is not just that I'm Latina. No, I bring the fact that I'm an immigrant, undocumented when I was younger, English is my second language, come from a predominantly working class family. All of that is very different. And how you practice or think about policy, how you think about teaching a class, because you want your students and your community that you're working with to understand that there's different struggles. Like I said, with access, why we think, community college, access all the way, everybody has access. I'm like, they don't have access if they can't have transportation or money to get to that place.
Or even know that's an option.
Or with our homeless situation, right? We have 800 students who are homeless, recorded from the JC. If we don't have a home, how are these students going to come? Why would they come? If that's added stress to their lives. So you have to think about outside of that. And it's not just diversity for diversity's sake. It's because they do bring a whole different perspective and a whole different way of looking, of even solutions, right? You're not just thinking of the problem, no, but what are the solutions that they might be thinking about, right? Or, the whole collaboration with Creighton Day Center and the Southwest and getting the day laborers to actually take classes and all that. That is an amazing way to think about how do we integrate our community that necessarily are going to be getting this, a degree, but they need a certificate, right, to up their skills, English language. The same thing with students who work with them, like young adults. Then they have a whole different perspective about the value of the work that they do, right? Then leads to more decency, more, this other way of thinking. And also, that theory is not just theory. You need to put it into the works and see how that's going to happen. And for our younger kids, that's also very important. You have to be able to, like I am a hands-on. So if I take a science class and it's just a textbook, that's just, you need to do something beyond that. I mean, show me, teach me, let me build something. And we definitely need to get with that. And I mean, like I said, we have, faculty pockets here and there, and even staff that do all these things. But if we work collectively to change, it could be great. And again, I love the JC. I want it to, it's a strong community, it's a strong college. I want it to be stronger. I want it to be a model, innovation, right? And that starts with also having faculty, tenure track faculty preferably, and not ones who are worrying about having to work on this, all these places, the staff. So all those kind of things.
The percentage of full-time employees versus the percentage, let me just rephrase that. I think of everyone who works at the JC, maybe 10% is full-time, and 900 other instructors are part-time or doing a class. I guess you have to do at least 2 or 3 classes to be a full-time instructor.
Well, yes and no, because you can be a full-time instructor, but you're not in tenure track instructor. So those are two different things.
So there's no retention, there's no...
those are two different, you can be full-time and every year it's conditional. So you might not have that security.
I live in that kind of contract situation myself, and it really chisels like your...
And the same thing happens with staff, right? You have short-term, non-continuing, and that's also, again, there's a lack of security. And for where we live with the cost of living, that's a very stressful situation, and that's are things that you need to consider. So for me, when I'm running for this position, people are like, well, why? I'm like, students. And I'm not talking 18 to 24, but I'm like, in general, we need to focus on the needs of the students. Yes, I understand budgets. Yes, I understand all these things. But at the end of the day, without these students, we don't have staff, we don't have faculty, we don't have administration, and we definitely don't have this board. Right? So if we don't listen to their needs it's going to be very complicated. And I've seen, now that we're Hispanic Servant Institute, I have friends who their research and work is on HSIs, but model HSIs. How do we become a model HSI that by serving this particular population, it also trickles down to serve other students, right? First generation students, it's all. Race, that's where it transcends. It's all, majority of our students are going to be first generation going into higher ed. So the models of these successful models, that's what I want to see the GC become, a model HSI, that we are held accountable, right? The board holds ourselves accountable, but also we hold those who have that grant accountable. And those are all important because, again, it leads to student success. College age success, returning student success, parents, and it also leads to a successful, stronger, at-large community. And people don't, sometimes I don't think they see that there's that connection. It's not just a school, it's a school that we participate in, whether we go there or not, right? And so we need to really embrace and really think about, you know, technically the bottom up, not the top bottom. We need to think about what are their needs and how, as we on the top technically can better serve them so that it is a better, that it flows better, in my opinion. Maybe I'm a big dreamer in that, but that's how I see it. I don't see it as the students are just there. No, I'm like, we are because of the students. We can't, it doesn't work the other way around. So we need to focus on that for sure.
Well, you've raised a lot of great issues. You certainly have my vote. Talking with Dr. Mariana Martinez, running for Santa Rosa Junior College's Board of Trustees. Thank you.
Thank
for coming.
you for having me.
Yeah, come back. Yeah.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, sure.